Most travelers picture Africa as endless savannas and roaming herds. Zimbabwe, stranger's secret. The stone towers of Great Zimbabwe once tracked the southern sky so precisely, scholars suspect early astronomy. High on the mist-draped peaks of Zimbabwe's Eastern Highlands, an island of cloud forest shelters plant species found nowhere else on Earth. Do you know that Vumba Botanical Gardens preserves ancient cycads and orchids whose genetic lineage reaches back to forests that disappeared with the dinosaurs? Walk its winding paths, and you meet centuries-old yellow wood trees, ferns the size of umbrellas, and moss-draped oaks that act like living time capsules. The gardens were deliberately planted and nurtured during the colonial era, but time and the mountain climate turned them into a refuge for both exotic collectors and endemic survivors. Birdsong here is a living map. Olive woodpeckers, the Shiknisna turako, and rare forest warblers flit through canopies, linking the gardens to the wider Eastern Highlands flyway. From a high terrace, you can glimpse the folds of the Chimanimani Mountains and imagine how seeds and species once traveled between these ranges, stitching together Zimbabwe's wild heart. Gardens' ponds hide tadpoles of local amphibians, while secluded rock ledges support lichens and miniature ecosystems seen by few visitors. In the next segment, we trace those discoveries into neighboring Nyanga and Chimanimani, following a single seed's improbable voyage that reshaped our understanding of Southern Africa's plant heritage. Between the formal rose beds and wild forest margins, small conservation projects propagate threatened proteas and aloes, reintroducing them where wildfires once erased entire stands. Visitors who pause to speak with the gardeners learn stories of plants transplanted from Mozambique's borderlands, revealing a cross-border ecology that defies political maps. That living history, scientific notes pinned to wooden benches, pressed leaves in leather journals, ties Vumba Botanical Gardens to an enduring human effort to protect and understand Zimbabwe's botanical riches. Walk with your hands empty, and you might leave carrying a new sense of how a single garden can hold, in microcosm, the fragile, astonishing diversity of a whole mountain range. High on Zimbabwe's eastern edge, the Chimanimani Mountains cradle one of southern Africa's rarest cloud forests, a mist-drenched mosaic of quartzite peaks and deep ravines. Do you know Chimanimani is pierced by an icy emerald gorge, where waterfalls tumble into pools that nurture plant species found nowhere else on Earth? Ancient sandstone and sculpted granite yield narrow ridgelines like the iconic Bridal Veil and the sentinel boulders that shelter endemic ferns and tiny orchids. Hikers who follow worn footpaths from the village of Chimanimani to the border with Mozambique often find granite tours that have watched the ski for millennia. From here, the range leans into the Eastern Highlands, linking green slopes to the misty plateaus of Nyanga and the river-carved valleys flowing toward Mutare. Local guides will tell you stories of mountain streams that glow at dusk, fed by springs whose chemistry supports frogs and invertebrates, recorded only in these mountains. The climb to peaks like Monte Binga reveals sudden alpine grasslands, hidden tarns, and cliffside fynbos pockets that shift color with the seasons. Conservationists come for those fragile ecosystems where invasive species and changing rains threaten a living library of ancestral plants. Yet Chimanimani's true secret is its silence, a layered hush that preserves the calls of rare birds and the whisper of wind across heathland. That quiet has kept human history close to the surface, with ancient trails, medicinal plant knowledge, and mountain folklore still practiced by local communities. As the mountain slopes descend, rivers knit together a corridor of life that connects Chimanimani to lowland savannas and the greater Zimbabwean landscape. Follow that corridor, and you trace not only geography, but a fragile chain of habitats whose stories we cannot afford to lose. In winter, mist and frost carve delicate crystals on high grasses, and in summer, sudden storms can transform valleys into roaring ribbons of water. Scientists mapping the range have still uncovered new insect and plant species within a single season of surveys, proof the mountains guard secrets waiting to be named. Travelers who camp beneath the stars here speak of a horizon that feels closer, as if the peaks fold you into a landscape older than borders. Those nights are when conservation efforts feel urgent and intimate. Bindura grasslands preserve an unusually continuous stretch of savanna grassland where scrub, termite mounds, and hidden seasonal pans stitch together habitats for dozens of elusive bird species. Do you know that throughout the dry months, the Bindura grasslands host isolated green islands fed by underground seepages that sustain life when the surrounding plains turn bone dry? Tall spear grasses ripple under a sky so wide it feels like a living canvas, and with each step the ground reveals a new chorus of inpis and seeds. Sunbirds, larks, and secretive rails flit between bulrushes while small antelope thread their way through the tussocks, always half seen, always on the verge of vanishing. Local communities have worked with the land for generations, using controlled burns and seasonal grazing to keep the grasslands healthy rather than sterile. These practices seam the plains to nearby reserves and uplands, forming a corridor that leads eastward toward the rocky ridges of Mavuradona. After rain, the whole place erupts. A carpet of wildflowers draws pollinators in such numbers, the air seems to hum with wings. Ecologists come to measure how fire, water, and grazing synchronize here, using those lessons to restore degraded patches elsewhere in the region. Walk slowly at dusk, and you will hear the termite symphonies underfoot and the distant laugh of a hyena threading through the grass. Migratory flocks and resident songbirds ride thermals above the plains, turning the sky into a living migration map that changes with the weather. Beneath your feet, ancient granite outcrops govern drainage and soil, shaping the tiny pans that in wet years become temporary wetlands for migratory species. Conservationists now use Bindura as a living laboratory for pasture restoration and community-led stewardship, testing methods that could scale across southern Africa. The success of these small experiments will shape whether current generations can pass on the grasslands as working landscapes rather than abandoned pasture. Stand in the long light at sunset and watch the grasses roll like a bronze sea. It is a quiet lesson in resilience and interdependence. Stay with us as we follow those sunset tracks into the riverine forests and seasonal pans beyond, where the next chapter of this landscape unfolds. Bubi Mountains cradle one of Zimbabwe's rare granitic cloud forest plateaus, where mist nourishes pockets of ancient Afro-montane flora. Do you know that the Bubi Mountains shelter endemic orchids and conifers found nowhere else on Earth, surviving as botanical islands above the surrounding savanna? Granite tors rise like weathered citadels above steep valleys, their exfoliated faces stitched with ferns and rare mosses. Hidden waterfalls and spring-fed streams carve narrow gorges that become lifelines for birds, frogs, and rare butterflies during the dry season. Local trackers speak of nocturnal species that glow in the damp leaf litter, and of medicinal plants passed down through generations. Walking its ridges, you feel the landscape change in minutes. Closed canopy fragments one moment, open grasslands the next, each hosting different wildlife. Culturally, the mountains are threaded with stories and rock art sites that hint at human presence long before colonial maps. These highlands also act as climatic anchors, catching clouds that replenish groundwater and feed streams far downstream. Scientists have begun cataloging insect species and amphibians here that may rewrite what we know about southern African biodiversity. Yet access is limited, and many of the Bubi's secrets remain unpublished, preserved by rugged terrain and local guardians. From the Bubi ridgelines, the land folds away into sweeping savanna corridors that connect to neighboring reserves and migratory routes. That corridor is vital. It's how mountain-dwelling creatures mingle with lowland herds and how seeds hitch rides on seasonal winds. Conservationists argue that protecting these uplands protects water security for communities below and preserves rare ecosystems under pressure from climate shifts. Efforts now link small-scale ecotourism, community stewardship, and scientific research to build a new model of care for isolated ranges like Bubi. As we climb further into leaf mold and granite shadow, the next stop awaits. A hidden escarpment where ancient rivers carve deep into stone and reveal ties to the broader Zimbabwean highlands. Charara Safari Area stretches along the eastern Zambezi floodplain, holding one of the highest elephant densities on the continent. Here, acacia-dotted woodlands open onto oxbow lagoons, where lechwe and hippo gather as the waters recede. Fewer visitors travel this route than to neighboring reserves, which has allowed predator-prey dramas to unfold with unusual intimacy. Lions and painted dogs thread the Mopani corridors, while ancient baobabs keep watch over the riverbanks. Walking here becomes a sensory conversation with the bush, guided by trackers whose footsteps trace generations of knowledge. Dawn brings a chorus of birds. African skimmers hover, kingfishers flash, and Pell's fishing owls call from shaded trees. Community scouts and conservation teams work shoulder to shoulder in Charara, safeguarding migratory routes that bind this area to mana pools upstream. Their efforts show in the return of species once thought rare and in the resilient sweep of floodplain grasses. At night, the sky becomes a spangled dome, and the distant grunts of hippo punctuate a quiet, unlike any city can offer. Yet Charara's fate is linked to patterns far beyond its borders. Shifting water and human pressures upstream ripple down the Zambezi. Photographers who linger capture scenes that feel sightless. Elephants wading through ankle-deep water, herons poised like sculptures. But each image is also a timestamp in an age of rapid environmental change and community-driven adaptation. From Charara, the river's current guides you north toward mana pools, where the floodplain opens into mirrored skies and rival prides. That living corridor is one of Zimbabwe's quiet triumphs, proof that wildness endures when people and land are woven together. Salisbury Kopje crowns Harare as one of the world's densest urban granite tors, a rare island of ancient rock and biodiversity inside a capital city. Do you know Salisbury Kopje hides pockets of indigenous, miombo-like vegetation and secret rock pools that have sustained life since before the city existed? Climbing its weathered steps feels like walking into the city's deep memory, where stone and skyline meet. Tiny pockets of soil, trapped in granite fissures, host ferns, aloes, and hardy wildflowers that refuse to belong to the manicured lawns below. The Kopje is also a living museum. Its cracks and caves hold traces of human hands that used the rock for shelter and ceremony across millennia. On clear days, the summit frames Harare's grid and its tree-lined avenues, connecting this ancient outcrop to the modern rhythm of markets and parks. Rearranges, small furry survivors of African boulderlands, pop from ledge to ledge while raptors wheel above, turning the Kopje into a vertical theater of life. Local guides tell stories of herbalists and children who have long learned the Kopje's hidden paths, linking community memory to geological time. Walking from Salisbury Kopje toward the nearby botanical gardens feels like following an invisible seam that stitches wild rock into cultivated green. That seam continues outward, across Harare's highveld, to other Kopjes and Kopjes, a chain of granite islands that shaped settlement and spiritual life across Zimbabwe. In the shadow of the Kopje, Vendors and artists still trade in traditions and souvenirs that echo the hill's ancient motifs. Each carved bracelet or weathered stone seems to carry a fragment of the Kopje's stubborn endurance against time and city. For visitors who expect a simple hill, Salisbury Kopje offers puzzles, pockets of silence, unexpected plant species, and a horizon that reads like a map of human stories. Stay with it, and the Kopje will reveal how urban life and primordial rock can coexist, each shaping the other in surprising ways. From here, the journey flows naturally toward the nearby National Gallery and the sprawling markets where the Kopje's echoes continue in art and conversation. The hill is not just an isolated relic. It's a hinge between past and present, nature and city, waiting for you to trace its lines. Malilangwe Wildlife Reserve contains one of Zimbabwe's last intact miombo woodlands and a thriving black rhino sanctuary few places on Earth can claim. Do you know Malilangwe hides ancient San rock art in its granite kopjes and shelters more than 300 bird species, many migratory and endemic? What looks like a quiet stretch of mopane and red clay is actually a conservation laboratory where threatened species are bred, reintroduced, and carefully monitored. Visitors often miss that its shimmering dam creates isolated wetlands that attract rare water birds and sustain wildlife through brutal dry seasons. Conservation in Malilangwe is driven by a local trust that transformed former cattle land into a mosaic of pans, woodlands, and sanctuaries. Because of that focused protection, painted wolves roam alongside elephant herds, and predator-prey dynamics have been rebuilt almost from scratch. You can trace ancient human stories here. Rock shelters show paintings whose pigments have endured for millennia, speaking of climate shifts and long-vanished herds. The human stories are equally compelling. Community scholarships, anti-parasitic cattle programs, and shared water projects tie local people to long-term stewardship. By protecting both culture and biodiversity, Malilangwe offers a rare model of hands-on conservation that quietly changes the fate of an entire region. Researchers tracking radio-collared predators have uncovered surprising migration patterns that only emerge when landscapes remain connected. Seasonal floods redraw the map each year, and the reserve's flexible management adapts to those rhythms rather than fighting them. For travelers, quiet game drives reveal intimate scenes: a bull elephant cracking a marula nut, a lilac-breasted roller hovering above termite mounds. And because Malilangwe is privately managed, experiences are intimate and conservation income directly funds education, veterinary care, and habitat restoration. The Eastern Highlands of Zimbabwe cradle Mount Nyangani, the country's highest peak, and shelter an extraordinary cloud forest ecosystem found in only a handful of places worldwide. Do you know that Mount Nyangani's mist-laden slopes nurture plant species and amphibians that exist nowhere else on Earth? Begin in Nyanga, where rolling grasslands give way to glacially carved valleys, ancient stone terraces, and waterfalls like the cascading Troutbeck and World's View. From the summit of Mount Nyangani, rivulets form the headwaters of the Zambezi, linking these highlands to some of Africa's most dramatic river systems. Travel south, and the landscape folds into the Vumba Mountains, where rhododendron-lined trails and mist-wrapped villas overlook the sweeping Hond Valley. Here, orchids and ferns carpet the forest floor, and the resident birdlife includes rarities that draw ornithologists from across the globe. Follow the ridge into Chimanimani, where knife-edged peaks and granite tors create a miniature Drakensberg that shelters endemic butterflies and ancient indigenous trees. The Chimanimani foothills channel rain into the Pungwe River, which plunges east into Mozambique, a hydrological journey few visitors imagine. These corridors protect endemic species while stabilizing soils and regulating the microclimate that sustains downstream communities. In autumn, the highlands blaze with crimson proteas and golden grasses, an explosion of seasonal color that reveals the region's hidden botanical wealth. You can trace the geology in every outcrop, from glacial erratics in Nyanga to the folded schists of Chimanimani, each telling a story millions of years old. Local guides will point out medicinal plants used for generations, and the whispered myths of spirits living in the misty kloofs add another layer to this uncanny landscape. As the highlands spill into lowland savanna, those same waters feed the lifeblood of communities and ecosystems far beyond the mountain's silhouette. To walk the Eastern Highlands is to follow a living timeline where geology, climate, and culture converge in ways few places on Earth do. In the next segment, we'll trace a single river's journey from summit to sea and uncover the hidden connections that make Zimbabwe's Eastern Highlands vital and fragile. One of the planet's last remaining spray-filled rainforests clings to the basalt cliffs below Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. Do you know Bridal Veil Falls, a narrow curtain of water hugging the eastern edge of that gorge, keeps its mist alive long after the main torrent has thinned? Most visitors pass Bridal Veil on their way to the thunderous main falls, unaware that this quieter cascade hosts a fragile pocket ecosystem found in almost no other place on Earth. Mosses, ferns, and rare palms survive here on Mudston Spray, while hammer-headed insects and tiny frogs make homes in the dripping basalt. The fall's slender veil fractures into dozens of silvery threads that change with every gust of wind, creating ephemeral passageways that local trackers once used to read the river's mood. Beneath that curtain, a hidden trough carved over millennia still hosts pools that feed the Zambezi's lower channels into the Batoka Gorge. Geologists say the same ancient fractures that guide Bridal Veil's flow also determined where Victoria Falls would split, making the two cascade siblings in stone in time. Birds that nest on the cliff face use the microclimate of Bridal Veil to fledge young earlier than those farther from the spray. Walk close enough, and you can hear a softer, higher-pitched roar, a private chorus that reveals how water silently reshapes rock and life. Local guides will point to mineral ledges where salt and iron deposits paint the rock in bands, an archival record of seasons written in stone. At dawn, thin rainbows hang within the veil like stitched promises, and at night, the falls keep a cool, humid silence that shelters plants that nowhere else in Zimbabwe flourish so privately. If you follow the streams that dribble from Bridal Veil down toward the riverbed, you trace pathways that connect the falls to islands, rapids, and the wider floodplain, where hippos and herons meet. Bridal Veil is a quiet translator between the colossal force of Victoria Falls and the subtle, life-giving channels of the Zambezi. Understanding this little cascade means understanding how one great river fragments into habitats that sustain an entire region. Later in the film, we'll step beneath the veil and listen to the small, startling stories the spray keeps hidden. You'll meet the scientists, the elders, and the birds that insist this narrow curtain matters as much as the roar everyone remembers. Dry stone structure in sub-Saharan Africa, built without mortar and standing for centuries. Do you know Great Zimbabwe once anchored a medieval trading network that stretched to the Swahili coast and the markets of the Indian Ocean? Walking among the concentric enclosures and the iconic conical tower, you feel the scale of an empire encoded in stone. Historians now believe the site was home to thousands of people who governed trade in gold, ivory, and cattle from the 11th to the 15th centuries. Every carefully fitted stone tells a story of craftsmanship and organization so advanced that early colonial writers refused to credit indigenous builders. Recent archaeology has righted that wrong by uncovering pottery, ironwork, and beadwork that confirm local innovation and complex social systems. The royal enclosure, with its towering walls, hints at political power and ritual life that controlled the surrounding plains. Beneath the stones, archaeologists have found evidence of trade goods from distant lands, suggesting a cosmopolitan center at the heart of southern Africa. As sun sets over the ruins, shadows lengthen across the mortarless stones, and you sense a civilization that organized labor, faith, and commerce on an epic scale. The silence between the walls invites questions about decline, migration, and the shifting patterns of trade that reshaped the region. Great Zimbabwe is not just an archaeological site, it is a living chapter in Zimbabwe's story, connecting ancient ingenuity to contemporary culture. Its stones are a language of memory, challenging assumptions and provoking curiosity about who built, ruled, and sustained this remarkable city. In the next segment, we'll trace the trade routes that linked Great Zimbabwe to the Indian Ocean world and reveal the objects that traveled those paths. These artifacts will show how local craftsmanship met global demand, reshaping identities across continents. Understanding Great Zimbabwe transforms the way we see Southern Africa's past, replacing myths with evidence and respect. And as we follow those trade routes, we'll uncover surprises that rewrite familiar histories in unexpected ways. Victoria Falls funnels more than 500 million liters of water per minute over a cliff 108 meters high and nearly 1.7 kilometers wide, creating the world's largest sheet of falling water by combined height and width. Do you know Victoria Falls, or Mosi-oa-Tunya, generates its own rainforest spray climate, supporting orchids, palms, and rare insect species in the middle of a dry savanna? Underneath that roaring curtain, the Zambezi River carves basalt gorges that are older than most national borders, and they still redirect the water into hidden whirlpools. Local communities call the thunderous sound Mosi-oa-Tunya, and those sounds have guided elephants, fishermen, and even colonial explorers for centuries. At low water, the cliff reveals secret ledges and Devil's Pool appears, a natural infinity pool where daring swimmers float inches from the plunge. Most visitors never learn that the falls can reverse flow in pockets during flash floods, briefly throwing water back into the upstream rocks and altering rapids for miles. The constant spray creates micro-weather that nurtures a pocket rainforest home to plant species found nowhere else on the plateau. Researchers still find new micro-moth species and tiny crustaceans in the splash pools, organisms adapted to permanent wetness in an otherwise seasonal river. Beyond the mist, the Batoka Gorge plunges for kilometers, its sheer walls trapping the river's energy and feeding remote whitewater stretches used by rafters and hydroplanners. That noise gorge links the falls to far-off wetlands downstream, meaning changes at Victoria Falls ripple through the fisheries and floodplain ecologies hundreds of kilometers away. If you stand on Knife Edge Bridge at dawn, you can watch ephemeral rainbows morph into towering thunderheads and witness geological time in the basalt bedrock below. The falls also hide human histories, sacred sites, colonial footprints, and local myths woven around the smoke, thunder, and those who live with it. Gonarezhou National Park in southeastern Zimbabwe holds one of the planet's largest expanses of in-baked sandstone gorges and seasonal wetlands, landscapes found in only a handful of places worldwide. Do you know Gonarezhou shelters one of Africa's last unbroken elephant corridors, where bulls travel hundreds of kilometers between Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and South Africa? The park's name means place of many elephants, and its vast Mopane plains and granite kopjes echo with ancient migration routes. Hidden along the Save River are crimson-stained cliffs and isolated pools that nurture rare bird species and endemic fish few scientists have cataloged. Gonarezhou's rugged remoteness kept it off the main safari map for decades, sheltering relaxed herds, shy wild dogs, and cheetahs that skirt the park's dunes. From the sweeping vistas of Kiloho Cliffs, you can trace the geological story that connects this park to Zimbabwe's Eastern Highlands and to the Limpopo Basin beyond. Local Shangaan communities have been stewards of these lands for generations, their oral maps guiding researchers to hidden springs and cave paintings. Conservation efforts now stitch Gonarezhou into the greater Limpopo Transfrontier Park, promising corridors that reunite predators and prey across national borders. Walk a dry riverbed at sunrise, and you may find footprints layered like a ledger. Elephant, hyena, leopard, each telling a seasonal story of survival. Researchers monitoring the park have also discovered unexpected botanical pockets where rare cycads and aloes thrive in microclimates created by the sandstone folds. Gonarezhou's night sky is another rarity. Far from city glow, the Milky Way spills bright and uninterrupted, used by locals to time hunting and planting cycles. Yet the park balances fragility and resilience, facing poaching pressures and climate shifts, even as community-based tourism offers new hope for sustainable protection. Exploring Gonarezhou is to follow pathways that connect to Mana pools downriver and to Kruger across borders, revealing a living network of southern African wilderness. In the coming minutes, we'll trace those connections, meet the people and predators that define this landscape, and uncover why Gonarezhou matters far beyond its red cliffs. From the thunderous curtain of Victoria Falls, where the Zambezi plunges into a misty gorge, to the shimmering backwaters of Lake Kariba, Zimbabwe's landscapes move like a living mosaic. Do you know the ancient stone ruins of Great Zimbabwe still whisper trade routes that once stitched southern Africa to the Indian Ocean? In the savannas of Hwange and the wild rivers of Mana pools, herds move and predators circle in a rhythm older than the mapmakers who tried to tame them. Across the Eastern Highlands, cloud-kissed peaks and hidden waterfalls offer a cool counterpoint to the heat of the lowlands, and every valley harbors plants found nowhere else on Earth. The human stories thread through every vista. Ndebele hilltop art in Matobo, Shona stonework at Great Zimbabwe, and fishermen's songs on Kariba's shores, each place feeding the next in an unbroken line. Travel here, and you don't just collect photos, you collect connections, of geology to culture, river to ruin, predator to plains, each encounter revealing why Zimbabwe feels less like a country and more like a living chapter. So when the day fades behind the escarpment and the night drums begin, remember that the spectacle you witnessed is only the surface. Deeper wonders lie in the faint paths, the oral histories, and the tiny endemic blooms that refuse to be cataloged. Come with curiosity, leave with stories, and let Zimbabwe's silent places continue to unfold long after your footprints have faded.